everyone, and thank you for attending this inaugural Power Hour, Public Policy Power Hour. This is a new engagement, and it's to keep the Williamsburg Realtors knowledgeable and connected to our legislative initiatives and goals throughout the coming year. I'm very excited about this, to have the ability for us to do this. Our plan is to conduct 7 of these through 2021, which address local state advocacy topics such as community-driven informational sessions. We also hope that you will ask community-driven questions that may need our input or require further investigation. We hope you'll be able to join us for all the scheduled power hours, but if not, the plan is to record them and post them to the association's YouTube, so they'll be available as your time affords for you to be able to watch them. And our goal is to announce the date and topic for the next power hour at the end of the previous power hour. And so without any further ado, I want to hand the reins off to our Williamsburg public policy consultant, Susan Gaston, who will be the moderator for all these sessions. Susan, take it away.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Dale. I am really pleased as I look out and see so many familiar faces. We didn't know what to expect for this. I didn't know if we were going to have 2 or 22, and it looks like we're closer to the 22. So thank you, everyone, for being part of the afternoon. We won't belabor much, but I do want to certainly introduce and thank my good friends from the Virginia Realtors. Some of you may know these folks anyway, but they are worthy of introduction, and you all really do need to get to know them and appreciate all the amazing work that they do for you as individuals, for your clients, for your business. I do want to give them an introduction. But before I do so, I'm just going to note a quick housekeeping detail here. If you're not speaking, I would ask you please put yourself on mute so that we don't have any interruptions or unnecessary background noise. It really does help if we can keep the disruptions to a dull roar here. And I see we have some more people coming in, but let me introduce first, we have Mary Lawson. She is one of the boots on the ground lobbyists with Virginia Realtors. We also have Anthony Reedy, another familiar face with everyone, perhaps. I'll tell you, the one who is the leader, I should say, of this rowdy band of pirates, Martin Johnson, is not here yet, but I think he's going to be joining us shortly. But I will tell you that I work hand in glove with Martin, Anthony, Mary, and Erin Barton, who is also here. You can't see her face. She's busy multitasking, doing legal work and legislative work for you guys today. But Erin is really the legal eagle behind all of our legislative work, along with Chip Dix. She writes the amendments. She writes the bills. She will go in the hallways with us and help explain the technicalities to legislators. And she is an integral part of our team. But I cannot tell you how much fun we all have. It is a lot of work doing what we do, and it is intense, and it's long hours and long days, but I cannot think of better people I would want to spend that kind of time with than Martin, Mary, Anthony, and Erin, and we do good work for you guys. Before we get into some of the details of our legislative agenda, I want to paint for you all, and I would invite Anthony, Mary, and Erin to hop in as well. I want to give you a good overview of what we are expecting this upcoming General Assembly session to look like. By virtue of the Virginia Constitution, it convenes on the second Wednesday of January, which is next Wednesday, the 13th. That part has not changed. Clearly, look at all of us on this call today in this meeting. We're all on Zoom. Everything is virtual. The numbers are going up with the pandemic, with the virus, and that's not lost on House and Senate, Democratic and Republican leadership. So we will be having a 30-day, that's a very short session, a 30-day General Assembly session, and it will be essentially all virtual. The Senate will be all in the same place in Richmond. They'll all be convening as a body in the Virginia Science Museum, socially distanced, 6 feet apart, masked, couple of members are actually behind some plexiglass because they have some underlying health conditions, and so extra protections are given to them. And of course, it will be a sad convening of the Senate this year because we have lost a member. Senator Ben Chapin passed away from COVID on Friday, and he was a huge advocate for housing and business and real estate, and just one of the finest men I knew. And his loss will be very acute over the next several days. The House will all be meeting virtually from their districts. They might be in their law office. They might be in their physician's office. They might be in their car. They might be in their church. Wherever they are going to be meeting just as we're meeting right now. So all committee meetings virtual, all subcommittee meetings virtual. Martin and Mary and Anthony and Aaron and I do not have access to the Capitol or to the legislative office building. So we will be meeting with legislators much like we're meeting today. And I'm going to remind everyone again to please mute yourselves if you're not talking, just to block the background noise from us. Thank you. So it's going to be a very unique session for us. And I was describing before Cindy opened the room to everybody what we know to be at least the House functionality each day, which, you know, it's one thing to be there in the Capitol building where we're moving around from the legislative building to the Capitol building, and we're going to concurrent meetings, and there's the energy and the partnership and the thrill of it all. And we're reduced to all online, beginning with subcommittee meetings at 7 in the morning. And the days will be very long with the floor sessions not starting until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, at least in the House. Not their usual noontime kickoff. So it's going to be a very intense time. And we will do everything we can to keep you involved and engaged and informed, but we would probably have to ask for some diligence from you all and give us a little bit of, you know, time to adjust and make sure that we have all information accurately ready to be sent to all of you. So it's going to be certainly very different, but you know, we're still excited about getting together with our legislators, working with our champions. There are many Realtor champions out there. But I think with that, I'll take a quick flip over to the VR team, and we can talk about our legislative agenda. Much of it is not new. Some of it are amendments to things that you all have heard of before. One issue is one that you've become very familiar with. There is one that's relatively new that, you know, I think is very applicable to all of us who call Hampton Roads home. But we're keeping it a little bit lighter this year because we are limited. Legislators are limited in how many bills they can introduce. And in a 30-day all virtual session, we're really not looking for seriously difficult lifts because they will be very, you know, it will be a hardship for everyone to try to go into a complex issue in a very, very short session under these circumstances. So I want to thank again my friends from VR. I miss them greatly. I don't know the last time we actually were all together in the same space, probably around March 8th or something. But they're an amazing team, and I'm a better lobbyist for working with them. And I just have so much fun with them, I can't tell you. So Anthony, Mary, Aaron, I'll let you guys kick off maybe with a good overview of what we suspect our agenda will be as of around 12:10 today. So take it away. And I'm here to augment and hop in, and we're going to make this a fun dialogue. We don't want to just you all to feel like you're being lectured.
Absolutely. Sounds good, Susan. Again, as Susan introduced, my name's Anthony Reedy. Susan, I think Martin is calling on the line. I know he had a kind of a last minute obligation with one of his kids. So he is on. So I don't know if Martin, you want to jump off, or do you want me to roll with it?
Yeah. Hey, Anthony, this is Martin. Yeah, you go ahead and roll with it. Susan, thank you so much. I just jumped on. This is the joy of being a stay-at-home parent right now with 2 kids in virtual school. I got an emergency message to run up to my son's elementary school and pick up a study packet. So with that, I am driving, and so Anthony and the team will fill you in. Susan, thanks so much for the great and I think very accurate picture that you painted of what we're going into this General Assembly session. It is in many ways a history-making session, but I will assure you, and then I'll let Anthony take it. I can assure you that we are on the ball. We're ready to go. It will be much different this year, but we are there, and we'll spend our days and nights and weekends, as we always do, looking out for you and your best interests. So thanks for having us on, and I'm sorry I can't be there in obviously in person, but also on camera. So Anthony, roll with it.
Okay, thanks. And just to, and obviously Mary and Aaron can jump in as they feel need to, or if you have questions on the way, just flag us if you want to send something in the chat or raise your virtual hand on Zoom. But just to add in a little bit more context to what Susan was describing, for the kind of the challenge that we're going to be dealing with during this General Assembly session with the virtual nature of everything and the limited bill numbers, is we had a little taste of that this past fall and learned some lessons. And I think when discussing that feedback with our public policy team at the state level and the local government affairs directors, local association executives, and the leadership with the Virginia board and our leadership team, purposely wanted to scale down the number of bills that we're going to be carrying this year, understanding those dynamics that are going to make it much more difficult to move legislation through the process. And also, we're going to be playing a lot of defense this year. There are a lot of some bills that are put in that are in direct opposition to what our members try to do every day in serving their clients. But there are also a lot of bills that are put in that are well-intentioned but have a lot of negative unintended consequences that we have to hopefully work with patrons to address those and eliminate those concerns if we can come to some mutual agreement. And we do work very hard with legislators to try to find a solution, just as you all do for your clients. We want to get to yes for everybody. We want to find a solution that works for everybody. But at the end of the day, if it's bad policy, if it's bad legislation, then we want to oppose that. So that's also forefront of our minds and efforts this year. But back in the fall, the General Assembly did meet for a special session to address the budget concerns related to economic impact of COVID-19, and also address some of the concerns with the social reform demonstrations that happened over the summer and fall. And when the special session was initially called, a lot of legislators, a lot of lobbyists, other advocates were assuming to be relatively short, maybe about 10 days or so, week and a half, and it ended up being over 90 days. And it was a complicated, frustrating time, aside from the policy discussions for a lot of folks, but just the logistics of virtual meetings and trying to get legislators to be able to have a robust debate and be able as advocates to communicate that to legislators. So we learned some lessons from that and are using that to approach the upcoming General Assembly session. But with that in mind, we've got 4 basic initiatives that our Public Policy Committee and our leadership team wanted to advance forward in the General Assembly. As Susan said, one issue that you all are probably very familiar with and something that we've been pushing for about 2 years now, which is the association health plans legislation. And as you may recall, last year we had a bill that passed out of the General Assembly with very strong bipartisan majorities during the regular session. It actually came out uncontested in the Senate and only had 3 no votes in the House. And then once it got over to the governor's office, they had some concerns. We did our very best to address those concerns, but the governor sent down some amendments to the legislation that we didn't think were appropriate. we moved forward in the Senate to actually not only rejecting the governor's amendments, but also passing the bill in the affirmative, which would basically finalize legislation and make it become law. Unfortunately, we hit a little speed bump in the House and weren't able to get the votes to do that. And there was a lot of miscommunication at the end, a lot of misinformation being spread by some of the opponents that we did our best to address, but unfortunately came up a little bit short. And when the bill went back to the governor, minus his amendments, he ultimately ended up vetoing the legislation. So with that in mind, we took some of the concerns that they had and are planning on pursuing the legislation again, but a very specific, narrowly tailored piece of legislation. Association health plans are currently allowed in Virginia if you're part of a industry group, trade group, that is based on a employer-employee relationship. As you all know, most realtors are self-employed independent contractors. So under those rules, we don't have that option. So the bill last year would basically have opened up that option to any association. There were certain requirements on the on the solvency and stability of the association, but it would have required or allowed independent groups of independent contractors, self-employed businesses to pull together for that. So the bill that we're looking at this year will specifically narrow it down to the Realtors Association. And what we heard back from a lot of legislators was, well, we understand this is an issue for you all, and if it was just for you guys, we would move forward with it, but we're concerned about kind of the larger impact on the individual market and potentially pulling people off of the individual marketplace under the ACA. And of course, our retort to that was, well, some of our members are on the ACA, but we have about 7,000 who have no insurance at all because they make too much money to qualify for any subsidies, but they don't make enough money to pay out of pocket for the very high premium and deductible costs associated with insurance on the individual market. So taking that feedback from legislators, we're wanting to move forward this year with a piece of legislation that is specifically addressed to our members and the unique employment status that they have in regards to getting health insurance, and we'll keep everybody updated on any developments that happen with that.
Let me hop in just real quick, and Mary and Aaron, you all may want to, and Martin, one thing that we've been doing is, I know all of us have been having multiple discussions with legislators on this particular issue and trying to get their sense of, do we move it this year? How do we handle some things? At least in my discussions with everyone from Senator Monty Mason, Delegate Amanda Batten, Delegate Shelley Simons, Chairman Cliff Hayes, I mean, you name the legislator in the Hampton Roads region, it is not taking a whole lot to describe the bill. Because they remember it vividly from last year. And, I think that shows the amount of legwork that we did last year. And so they know the issue and they know the situation that all of you are in. And I think we've done a very good job of suggesting that during a pandemic is really not the time to not offer affordable health care to a greater universe. So but Mary, you've had a lot of talks. Martin, Aaron, I don't know if you all have any additional insight on the AHP issue, but I certainly want everyone to hear your perspectives before we move into the next subject area.
No, I just want to definitely. Oh, sorry, Martin, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mary.
No, I was just going to say, it definitely, as Anthony said, last year, I see Peggy Burks on the call, who chaired PPC last year, and she did an amazing job, and she knows better than anyone how hard we all worked, and we can't thank you all enough for all the calls for action that you did. And I don't think a bill could have gotten closer than we got it. And I still believe if we had been there on veto day and COVID hadn't have happened, we may have been able to get those last few votes over the line. But it was this year, we've made it even more narrower, and so it's still, we're still trying to figure out if is this the best year to do it, because like Anthony and Susan explained, it will be quite difficult.
Yeah. Martin, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was, and it kind of it complements in many ways Anthony's explanation, and then kind of Mary's adding on. I mean, you know, for those of I know that I can't see who you are, but I will guess who some of you are, and you've been around the General Assembly, you've been around politics for a long time, and you know what just a shrewd game it can be. This is and we'll call this what this is right now, and we've begun saying this to legislators. Point on what Susan said, it doesn't take much to explain to a legislator what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish and why we're trying to accomplish it. And we don't have legislators that really push back on that. There are a few that are kind of philosophically, they can't wrap their minds around kind of the impact this could have on the Affordable Care Act and the people that might be left on the Affordable Care Act if we pull people off of it, right? That's an argument that's going to be there. It has been there. It will continue to be there. And I think we've done an effective job in trying to get around that argument. This is a game of pure politics and who holds the power in politics. Governors, be it Governor Northam, be it Governor McAuliffe, Governor Kane, Governor Allen, they have a lot of power in Virginia, and that's by design. And so one of the things that we are doing is candidly analyzing whether or not this governor will, as he has done for the previous 2 years, exercise the same power over the legislature that candidly he has if we move a bill forward. And so we're in very confidential and candid discussions with members of the House leadership, the Speaker's office, the Majority Leader's office, certainly some of our Realtor friends. We've got a very bright younger member of the House of Delegates. His name is Chris Hurst, who is a very articulate, very passionate member who will again carry the bill this year for us in the House. I don't believe there's much of a problem. I don't believe there's much of a problem in the Senate, but the House is where all the action will occur. We remember, too, that all of our House friends are on the ballot this November, as is who will ultimately become our next governor. And so this is all about trying to navigate those sometimes slippery political situations and scenarios, all while doing it under the umbrella of a virtual session. And so I wanted to just add a little bit more context. It's not simply as much of a strategic decision as do we have enough votes? I believe we have enough votes. Susan, Anthony, Mary, Aaron, Chip, we all believe we have enough votes. Do we have enough votes then to exercise that next step, which is asking a House of Delegates to look at their governor of their same party in his final year and say, it's not going to matter what you do because we're going to override whatever it is that you do if you do something that's harmful to the bill. So just a little bit more kind of background information to help kind of, as Susan, I think, appropriately said, paint the picture of what we're going into.
I'll add, we always try when we get our local groups together, we always try to add a little bit of, the perspective from the region. And so for those of you who may or may not know or may not remember, there is a similar bill. It was really geared toward the chamber and some of the mom and pop small businesses that would have allowed them to coalesce around an affordable healthcare option. And that particular bill was carried by one of our number one folks in the region who we all adore, Senator Monty Mason. And his bill unfortunately met the same fate as our association health plan bills. And Senator Mason likes to say that he's part of a very small class. He is one of 3 Democrats whose legislation was vetoed by a Democratic governor. And he says it kind of like, it's not a big deal, but he's, it was certainly something that has impacted whether or not he's going to move forward on anything. But we've had a very candid conversation with Senator Mason. It was last Wednesday, you guys, I think, the VR team and I. So we're continuing to press the flesh on this. And we just want you to know that we understand the gravity of this issue for you. And we're going to do the very, very best that we can to make sure that it's going to be as successful as we can make it. And hopefully that will get us over the hump this year if we indeed make the decision to go forward. So that is a really important issue for all of you and for us. The next issue that we're going to pivot to, who's sick of that word, by the way? I mean, we pivot, it's like the word of the year. We're going next to discuss a relatively new issue with its details, but the subject area is not one that's new. It's kind of ingrained in all of us who call any part of Hampton Roads home, particularly in the past few days with all the rain we've had. The ground is soggy. The roads are still puddling. The stormwater systems are inundated, and so there's pooling everywhere. And we are constantly seeing recurrent flooding in Hampton Roads, and it is an issue that is critically important to all of you, particularly to you as buyer agents. Not that it's not important to you as seller agents, but it's really becoming a big deal for the type of information that a buyer should have access to when it comes to flooding and vulnerability and risk. So we are looking at a different twist this year for some flood-related issues. I think Aaron is kind of the point on that. But Martin, I'll let you determine if you want to start or if you want to let Aaron roll with it. But we are going to be taking a position and putting forth some legislation, we think, on a flood-related issue. Martin or Aaron?
Susan, yeah, sure. I'll open it up, and then if there are specific questions, we can certainly let Aaron jump in. So, I mean, I think as Susan said, this is an issue that most of you on this phone are familiar with, and it's one that candidly you as agents deal with probably much more so than your colleagues from around the state. For the past number of years, we've been in discussions with legislative leaders about what type of information is currently out there and maybe what type of information should be available and made available to buyers as they're making decisions on a piece of property as it relates to flooding, to the likelihood that the property could flood, to whether the property has flooded. We have done an extensive amount of research, and candidly, over the summer, we've learned a lot. We've been successful, very successful, I might add, for the past probably 4 or 5 years, both under Republican and Democrat majorities, of soundly defeating bills that said things like sellers must disclose if the property's ever flooded. Sellers must disclose what flood zone the property's in. Sellers must disclose whether the flood or the property could flood. These are all bills that are brought forward, I think, with decent intent, but they're just, it's the wrong way to do it. And it is for part-time legislators, I will say, it's a difficult, confusing, and oftentimes almost counterintuitive issue to discuss. And one of the biggest hurdles that we've had is getting legislators, really at all levels. This happens on the local level, it happens at the federal level, to understand exactly what a flood is through the eyes of FEMA and through the eyes of the National Flood Insurance Program, which is the entity that will pay out claims and that will cover flood damage. And what I mean flood damage as defined under federal law and under federal regulation. To put a finer point on it, as you all know, but again, a lot of legislators don't understand, and really even a lot of your colleagues from across Virginia who don't deal with water intrusion issues much may not understand. A flood is not a dishwasher that backs up and floods your kitchen. A flood is not necessarily a stormwater drain that backs up and floods the front yard or the street in front of your home. A flood is a very defined definition under FEMA. And so we have worked very hard on a piece of legislation, and we've worked somewhat in concert with the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission on a bill that will do two things. The first thing the bill will do is to create a one-page form that would be downloadable through the Department of Conservation and Rec's website. So to take a step back, right now, anybody in Virginia can go to the DCR, the Department of Conservation and Rec's website, can enter an address, doesn't even have to be your own address, can enter an address and can pull up a map that will show the person who does the search what flood zone the property is located in. It is very, very similar, almost identical to the FEMA flood map determination that I know many of you utilize. The problem is that while that information is wonderful, it's very hard to decipher depending on the browser that you may be using or your client may be using. It can be very grainy. The resolution of the screen sometimes can mess up, and it's very hard to determine exactly what letter is beside the property, which then designates the flood zone it's in. If you or a client shifts the mouse a certain direction, sometimes it'll take you to a completely different part of the locality. So all that being said, we've worked and we've basically drafted a one-page form that would be an option given to buyers that they could download that would be auto-populated through the DCR website. And on that one-page report, and we call it a flood risk report, not only will it tell the buyer, the consumer, just the general member of the public, what flood zone, based on the DCR map, the property is located in. It will also talk in general about flooding and about floods and about who is under federal law required to determine the need to have flood insurance. And maybe most importantly, it will talk about the benefits of having flood insurance when you're not required to have it. Right. And so what we know is there are thousands of homeowners, probably many more than that, that aren't required to have flood insurance. But boy, is it probably a good idea that they go ahead and purchase it. One, they're covered should there be a catastrophic flood that occurs. But two, there's an inherent cost savings in affordability in purchasing it when you're not required to have it. Those policies, as you all well know, are typically very, very inexpensive. So it gives not only peace of mind, but it gives real coverage to homeowners should there be flood damage that occurs, again, under the definition of what actually a flood is. So that's one part of the bill. The second part of the bill, which is a twist for us, is we talked a lot to policymakers in the Hampton Roads area. And candidly, the team in Richmond learned something. And what we learned is that properties that have, under the National Flood Insurance Program, flooded multiple times, and there have been claims that have been paid through NFIP on those properties, have been designated by FEMA to be repetitive risk loss properties. There's a specific definition under the FEMA guidelines, and the criteria that they use is any property that has had 2 or more claims paid out under NFIP in a rolling 10-year period beginning in 1978 is deemed to be a repetitive risk loss property. We took that and researched that with the team at NAR, who confirmed that was the case. And we took a proposal to the Public Policy Committee about 2 weeks ago and got them to vet it and then to approve it, which would add that provision in Virginia law as a mandatory seller disclosure. And what I mean by that is simply that a seller or an owner in a transaction would be required to disclose to the purchaser if they have actual knowledge that the property has been designated as a repetitive risk loss property. And then we included in the legislation what the specific definition is of a repetitive risk loss property, so that everybody, every seller's agent, every buyer knows exactly when we talk about a disclosure for repetitive loss properties. We think we've been told by NAR that's a fairly it's certainly very narrow in its scope, which is our intention. If it's drafted, if it passes in the way it's been drafted, it's fairly easy to determine whether or not you would have to disclose that. And so that is going to be the second part of the legislation. Senator Linwood Lewis from Norfolk and the Eastern Shore, who chairs the Joint Subcommittee on Coastal Flooding, who himself is an attorney who does real estate work, has agreed to carry the bill. And so with that, I'll, I guess, open it up to any questions, or if I've said something incorrectly, Erin can jump in. Being the smart lawyer she is, she oftentimes has to correct me if I've said something incorrect. So Erin, do you have anything to add to that, or just want to move on, Susan, and answer questions?
Oh, I desperately want to correct you, but I've got nothing. You covered everything.
That's a first.
Well, and again, you know, for those of you who may not know how all of us work together for you in normal times when we're having fun, working hard, but having fun up at the General Assembly, Martin is a real easy target for us to just pick on. And I can't agree with Erin more. If we could ever find a reason to, you know, try to correct him, it's a good day, but he's damn good at what he does. And so we don't often have to correct him, but he always finds a reason to correct us, even if it's not necessary. So are there, you know, any particular questions we can take at this point, Cindy? I know we only have until 1 o'clock, but we still have a couple of smaller, not that they're not important, but they're probably less complicated issues to cover. If you think, Cindy, that we can go ahead and cover those fairly quickly, then maybe we can open up to Q&A. What are your thoughts, you and Dale?
I think we should just move forward and cover the topics and then leave at least 5 or 10 minutes at the end for questions.
Sure, absolutely. So we are screen sharing now, and I'm going to go back to the beginning so you'll see the legislative agenda that the Virginia Realtors has disseminated. This is dated back from before Christmas, and you know there will be at least one additional iteration to this so that we would add bill numbers and patrons. So we've covered association health plans and consumer awareness with the flood risk report with a lot of good information, but we also want to cover what has become somewhat of a perennial issue for all of us, you know, to bring it home to WAAR. Our own Frank Hughes is sort of the godfather of amendments that come up every year to the POA and the Condo Owners Association Act. And this particular amendment to that bill really is, I think, somewhat simple given the environment that we all find ourselves in. I mean, here we are Zooming again today. That's sort of become part of our life. And so the bill essentially would allow for the POA and condo unit owner boards to conduct their meetings through electronic formats. But again, that's just the simplistic universe. Martin or Erin may want to get into a little bit more meat, but I will share with you that clearly this is not the session to do a wholesale overview, review, rewrite of these extensive statutes, but that is something that I think is on the radar when we are able to do it properly and with the amount of time that it will require. But this year, just again, is just not the year to do that wholesale review. Martin, Mary, Erin, you guys hop in here on POA and condo owners associations.
Yeah, I mean, Susan, I think you kind of nailed it. You know, I think there was a lot of discussion when the pandemic began, not just with condo and homeowners associations, but just associations and really business in general, we were in uncharted territories, and a lot of boards of directors and a lot of executive committees had to move from a physical environment to a virtual environment. There are repercussions with the State Corporation Commission, with regulatory bodies on doing that. And in some cases, what we found is that the code was silent on allowing folks to do that. And so we the larger business community, worked with the Attorney General over the summer, who gave some very helpful opinions on the ability, if the code didn't otherwise authorize it, to hold meetings like this in a virtual setting. And so all that this bill does, and it's been a great exercise. We've worked with the Community Associations Institute, which is the trade association for HOAs. We've worked with them on a piece of legislation. It's fairly nondescript and it's very technical, but what it will do for the first time is codify that associations can build into their governing documents an ability to have and host virtual meetings. So that's really all the bill does.
Perfect. Simple and short and sweet is the way the legislators are going to like things this year. We also, I know from looking at the lineup who are with us today, we do have some property managers who are paying attention and are part of our time together. And, again, another perennial issue is making regular amendments to the Landlord-Tenant Act, which, as you know, governs the rights and responsibilities of landlords and tenants in that very important relationship in the Commonwealth. We make annual amendments to those statutes, really based on what bubbles up from you all who are actually practicing the practice of managing real property for tenants, whether it's multi-unit, or I think in most cases our members manage small single family detached, owner might have 2 or 3 or maybe 4 properties. But I know Elizabeth Waldhall is on, and she is an active property manager, and candidly is one of our go-to people for what the real deal is when we need that information to share with legislators. There has been a lot going on in 2020 and even back a couple years on landlord-tenant, and as it relates to evictions. We could spend an entire hour just on that issue alone, and maybe that's something we should do once we get a little bit further into session, or even perhaps right out of session. But this particular amendment to the Landlord-Tenant Act really is more focused on what we need to do to bring the state code into alignment with a federal piece of legislation. And I think Martin would probably agree with me. Aaron Barton is really very tuned in to the details on landlord-tenant. So maybe either you, Aaron, or you, Martin, can talk a little bit more about this specific issue. But thought you all might want to know, particularly again, since this has been an important discussion over the past several months in terms of landlord-tenant.
Aaron, take it away.
Is there a specific, there's several landlord tenant issues that are going around. Was there a specific one that you wanted me to weigh in on, Susan?
I was, as I mentioned, I know we could spend a ton of time on evictions, but I don't know if we have that luxury today, because we do want to give our members a few minutes to have a Q&A with you all. I think just perhaps, Aaron, a quick snapshot of the foreclosure provision that we want to include in the amendment to the Landlord-Tenant Act during session.
Okay, so we for our bill, we have basically a simple technical change. I don't know if that's the one you're referring to, where we're going to bring the VRLTA into line with the Federal Foreclosure Act. Is that the one you're talking about?
That is the one.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a technical change. This is in the past several years, the Federal Foreclosure Act has been sunsetted, then brought back, then sunsetted, then the sunset removed. So it's retroactive. And basically where that left us, since the VRLTA was continuing to be amended every year, is that our state law is no longer in line with the federal law with respect to foreclosures, specifically when a person purchases a home through a foreclosure sale or after a foreclosure sale where a tenant is still residing. And so our change will bring our state law, our VRLTA, into line with the federal law, because the federal law overrides that anyway. And we just want to make sure that landlords that are going to law to find out what they can and can't do are finding the correct information. Specifically, it has to do with the notice that's required to be given to a tenant once a home is purchased after a foreclosure sale, and how long that tenant has to basically, stay or move out. And that's kind of a high level. It's really not creating any new law because it's already the federal law. It's just updating our state law to match.
Yeah, pretty simple. But again, important for you all to be aware that we're making that change, or at least proposing it to the General Assembly. So with that, Cindy, Dale, I'm showing 12:48. I think we have about 10 or so minutes for some Q&A. I will stop the screen share. We can send out these talking points, legislative agenda to you all, but this way I can sort of monitor who has a question or who might need some more information. But if you're good, Cindy, do you want to roll into a Q&A with everyone, and maybe the VR team can hang in there just for a few more minutes so that they can enhance some question or answers with any of their perspectives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's go.
Anyone have questions? Or not? You all are not usually a quiet bunch. I don't know if we've wowed you or bored you.
Or Susan, or any of our members, if you don't have a question about the legislative agenda, is there an issue here locally or anything in the community that is something that you need more information on that we can help you with, that we can add it to maybe research and get back to you on?
There is a lot going on locally too. We've got all this circulating at the General Assembly level, but at the local level, we have a comprehensive plan review in both the county of James City and York County and in the city of Williamsburg. So our tentacles are long and extended throughout all of those processes. In the city of Williamsburg, we are a big part. In fact, the city manager asked me to chair the neighborhood balance committee so that we could look at issues that really are impacting the neighborhoods around the college when it comes to student renters who are very much a higher percentage in some cases of the neighborhoods over on Burns Lane or Indian Springs and up and down Lafayette, even up and down Monticello, and what impact that's having on community character. So we have been working for over a year, the work group, and we have forwarded a number of recommendations to City Council. They'll be looking at those probably in March. I will tell you that the next power hour that we'll have in February will feature the city manager, Drew Trivet, and the planning director and zoning administrator, Carolyn Murphy, who will walk through the 27 recommendations that the work group came up with. Elizabeth also was on that group with me, and I think she would agree that we played very much the hand of making sure that that work group was aware of the tons of regulations and requirements that are placed on landlords. And we wanted to make sure that they were not unduly disincentivized from continuing to be part of the housing community in Williamsburg. So some of the recommendations we will like, some others we will not like, and some others we will be Switzerland on. But you'll hear a lot of those next month. And then when they come to council, we certainly will be very much engaged and involved in those discussions. I'll add that we're working on a housing study. Have not put it forward yet. We've only been given the thumbs up that our researcher will have the bandwidth to participate with us, but we'll be looking at New Kent County. There's certainly a growing bedroom community between here and Richmond, and we want to make sure they have an awareness of what their housing needs may be. Certainly with the pandemic and the work from home, communities that look like New Kent are experiencing different trends than they would have maybe a few years ago. So we want to give them that resource that they can be helpful, they can use, and it can be a helpful tool in their next planning efforts. And I think that the last thing that I'll mention is the ongoing work that we have in trying to work with James City County on what do they have in their housing stock, and what does the public think about living in the county and the quality of life and the characterizations of, are we easy to work with as a business entity, or are we really much not? So there's a lot going on at the local level in addition. And we will have more filtering through each of those as these bi-monthly. We'll have a February Power Hour, but then we're going into a bi-monthly effort here, and we want to make sure that you have as strong an awareness of what's going on at the local level as you do at the state level, and it is never ending right now. It always is that way, but it just seems to be more so at the moment. So again, I'm happy to take any questions. We can go into more detail, but thrilled that I think 32 of you at one point were part of this launch today, and we really appreciate your time and your interest. And thank you, Tia, for saying that we explain things so well that you don't have any questions for any of us. So, but I'll be quiet now. We'll just see who has something to add or to ask.
Hi, Susan. It's Elizabeth.
Hey, how are you? It's good to see you.
See everybody's faces, Cindy and Dale and Colby and everybody. So, yeah, I was excited to hear, and I did see it on the kind of legislative information you sent out, that you're really thinking about moving forward with the healthcare legislation again. I think that's really important. So hopefully it's something that we're able to move forward with. And yeah, so, and then of course all of the landlord tenant issues that we've got going on, that'll be a big undertaking. So yes, and thanks for all the hard work everybody's doing, Anthony and Aaron. Hopefully we'll come out of it on the good side, especially with the health insurance.
Definitely. We're certainly going to try hard to make that happen for you guys. So anybody else? Dale, the chairman of the committee, do you have anything for us, or anything to describe your goals and objectives and how we can all be in the same boat rowing together?
Well, yes, I think that these power hours and some of the other things we have planned for this year, it's really, we're making a huge push to make sure our membership is informed. I can't tell, I've been a major donor. I just got a beautiful cutting board from NAR. It was really, really nice. I saw Anthony, you got yours, and Susan got yours. I'm sure Cindy got hers. But honestly, if somebody said, what does it mean to be a realtor? It's the political advocacy side of things. I've said this and I'll say it again and again. If it's not for the realtors, there's nobody defending the homeowners. They're out there on their own. So what we're doing is extremely important, and staying informed is extremely important. And that's our goal this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Lynn corrected me. It's VAR, not NAR.
Is Martin, hey, Martin, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
One quick issue, and I hope I'm not like getting ahead of myself here. But here we are in this phase of where the vaccine is being disseminated and administered throughout the country, but each state is very much responsible for how they handle their own protocol for making sure its citizens are indeed vaccinated, at least for those who want the vaccine. And yesterday's press conference, those of us in the political wonky world call them pressers, he had really a focus on what the game plan was going to be for Virginia in terms of the rollout of the vaccines. And there are phases that have been developed by the Virginia Department of Health. Currently are in phase 1A, which puts all frontline healthcare workers, long-term care employees, and patients, I believe it was the age of 75 or older, in phase 1. And they're all going at the same time as far as the vaccine rollout. Phase 1B, which might not start rolling out until I've heard March, April, maybe May. I think they'd like it to be sooner, but I don't know what's the supply, if they're going to be able to make it happen before March, April, or May. Phase 1B are manufacturers, food and agriculture workers, telecommunications. I mean, there's a whole list of essential workers under 1B that come into the next phase. And then there's phase 1C. And one of the categories in 1C is housing and construction. So we're trying to assess, where does that leave all of you? We don't have an answer for you yet that I know of, but that's something that we're trying to find out. It was suggested yesterday at the presser that if you are in phase 1C and you can perform your duties as a practitioner remotely, then you don't get to go in the first group of 1C. You have to wait until maybe even the general public is offered the vaccine. But we wanted you to know that all of this is also circulating, and we're trying very hard to figure out where you fall into the phased vaccination protocol. So there's much more to come, and there's a lot we don't know, but we're trying to find those answers for you. I just wanted you all to be aware that that too is sort of in play. Martin, I don't know if you have some observations and any discussions with some of your contacts as well.
Yeah, Susan, I'm happy to. I think the governor did an effective job of candidly quelling what has become a lot of frustration, and not just with the governor, not just with the federal government. I mean, each state is experiencing their own dramatically slower rollout of the vaccine than we all expected, and maybe candidly we were all told. And that really is, there's a combination of factors that go into that. It is no one person's fault. It is no one agency's fault. That being said, I think what the governor tried to do yesterday was to provide some continued clarity. I think the challenge is, as many things are, particularly in this situation, it's kind of it's that great saying, the devil's in the details, right? And so I know that I took away from the press conference yesterday, how is the Department of Health going to determine, and I think it remains to be seen, whether you are able to work remotely or not. Clearly, there is a logistical and a policy target on those individuals, obviously, that are our essential workers and our frontline workers, the men and women that get up every day and go into a hospital system, that drive an ambulance, that patrol our streets. There is an increased emphasis on those Virginians who have underlying health conditions or because of their age may find themselves much more vulnerable to what could be a very bad outcome if they were to contract the virus. And then there's everybody else. And I don't say that snarky, I don't say that in a funny vein, but when you think about that and you take a step back from that, that's a lot of people. And so I know that I read with interest, Susan, like you did, and maybe like many of you on the phone did, this 1C tier that the words on the paper say housing and construction. How that is interpreted and what that actually means, I think will root out in the coming days and weeks. We've got some great contacts in the governor's office, and I would be remiss if I didn't maybe end my comments with my start of the time with you today was spent maybe being a little bit critical of this governor on the association health plan, and I remain critical of this governor on the association health plan issue. But I, on the flip of that, cannot say enough about this governor and his senior staff in working with our team every step of the way since about March the 12th to ensure business continuity, to ensure that he was clear in his directives to us as an industry on how best he wanted for us to operate. And so, you know, this is the type of relationship that industry groups like ours should have with the governor, with any governor. You know, we will be exploring exactly what that means while trying to balance wanting to get in the way of what is really the focus right now, which is getting our most vulnerable and our most essential Virginians vaccinated as really as soon as we can. So with that, there will be much more, I'm sure, to come on that. But that's a great addition, Susan. Thanks for chiming in with that.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. So we, as you all hopefully have seen today, there's a lot going on in all of our universes, but we are working so hard to make sure you're informed and included, and you know that you have advocates at all levels of government. So I think I'll stop here. If anyone, I know you all didn't have any inquiries for us before, but if anything else has come up, we can certainly close out with a question or two. And even if you don't have them now, but you have some follow-up that you think of later, you know how to get in touch with all of us, and we will work hard to make sure we can answer your questions. But you all let me know if we can do anything for you. And Dale, at this point, I'll just turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I want to thank you, Susan, and thank you for all Anthony and the whole team from VR. Everybody's trying to get used to the new VR versus the VAR, but anyway, the VR, we appreciate you guys a lot. We appreciate all the people on there, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Dale, can I say one last thing? Can I just say one last thing? I want to make sure that you all realize that we've given you this overview, but as part of the leadership's wishes to try to keep you all as informed throughout the process, we're going to implement another new event that you will be getting throughout the legislative session from Susan, and we're calling it our legislative lightning limelight. So a couple times every week, if there are things that are happening,
lightning round.
Thank you, Susan. So we're trying to come up with, so that Susan will be creating these 2 or 3 minute videos that as she is getting information, 2 or 3 minutes at the most, it won't be very long, but just for her to update you on some of these issues or where they are, whether we need your help, right? If we need to put out a call to action or something that we need you all to quickly react to or give us your feedback, we're going to try to disseminate that in these little 2 to 3 minute videos that we create, so that we're not just waiting until the next time we meet in February or April, but we're going to try to keep you as informed as possible each week so that you are on the cutting edge and as engaged with this as Susan and the Virginia team that we have with us. So thank you, Susan, for agreeing to do that for us. And we look forward to some of these videos that you're going to create.
I do too, because I haven't thought about them yet.
Well, nothing's happened yet, so you're not behind yet because nothing's happened. So starting next week.
You'll see a lot of this room, but after a while, the walls are going to start caving in. So I might be outside. I might be trying to get a breath of fresh air on a walk with my dogs. So I'll try to make them as fun and creative and informative in 3 minutes or less. That's why we're calling it the lightning round. It's got to be quick. No time for Q&A. So anyway, right. I'll try to make it fun.
Right. So I will be delivering those videos to you in your email. So we'll be putting it out to you. So look for those in your inboxes. And if you have any feedback from any of those or any questions as a result of any of those, if you send that to me, I'll get them to Susan and maybe she can answer them in her next lightning round.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. This has been great. My buddies at VR.
Thank you.
Awesome. You're the best.